So ESPN.com asked some of its writers to pick a season-defining game for every preseason top 25 team. Most of them were rivalry games. Like, okay, Ohio State's is Michigan. Michigan's is Ohio State. Shocker. We'll throw that out right now. Oregon and Penn State, Oregon and Ohio State, all those games are tied in together just like they were this past season. Chris Lowe was the writer to choose LSU's season-defining game. And he wasted no time because he chose the opener against the Clemson Tigers. This makes a lot of sense. This very well could be LSU's season-defining game. They've struggled in season openers. Haven't won a season opener since 2019. We talk about it all the time, right? And as great as the 2019 team was, they opened with Georgia Southern. Now you're in prime time. Most of these games are Sunday night, and you are opening with top 10 teams every single year. I love playing Clemson. I do kind of wish it was week 2 because you've struggled so much against these top-tier teams in the opening week. Okay, look, 2019 LSU. Everybody considers it the greatest college football team of all time. I am definitely not here to tell you any different. I think that is 100% true. But if you remember, they were in a battle with Texas in Austin, a 5-point game. That was week 2. Who's to say that if LSU doesn't play that game in week 1, they lose? Now, I think they still win that game, but the point is, the last time you did this, you played an easier opponent in week 1. Then you played that marquee out-of-conference matchup week 2. I wish LSU would go back to that. It's not going to happen, though. But there are a number of reasons that this particular game worries me. Reason number 1, you're on the road in a hostile environment. It's also a little bit different from the home games or the season openers that LSU's played in the past. They haven't really played a true road game. So 2020, you were actually at home against Mississippi State. You lose that game. UCLA, road game. You're in the Rose Bowl. You play UCLA. You lose that one. Then you got Florida State, neutral sites back-to-back. You got them in the Superdome. You got them in Camping World Stadium. You lose both of those. You haven't really played a true road game outside of UCLA, but Clemson is an entirely different beast. You are going into a hostile environment. Man, that is a really tough place to play. Look, I get it. We are the real Death Valley. We like to call Clemson Little Death Valley. It's hard to win there, though. Whatever you think about their nickname, who had it first, doesn't matter. It is hard to win there. Okay, Beck, since 2014, so the past 10 years of college football, Dabo Swinney has had 75 home games at Clemson. In 75 home games, what is his win-loss record in 75 home games in the last 10 years?
I'll say 55-20.
Dabo Swinney is 70-5 in 75 home games over the last 10 years.
Not close.
No, just put that out there. But the reason you're not close, Beck, is because that's absurd. And actually, 2 of those losses were last year. So from 2014 to 2023, he had 3 losses at home. That is ridiculous. So you're going into a place, a hostile environment with a coach that has been there for a while. He has his culture the way he wants to, and he is almost unbeatable at home over the last 10 years. And you struggle really bad in opening games. Also, the amount of returning production for Clemson on offense. Clemson returns Antonio Williams, TJ Moore, and Bryant Wesco. Those 3 guys were Clemson's 3 leading receivers last season. They are all back. Obviously, you have Cade Klubnik back. You look at the Heisman pecking order, Garrett Nussmeier, Arch Manning, Cade Klubnik. That's pretty much the list right there. It's going to be a premier quarterback battle. Now, I like my guy. We'll get to him in a minute, but Cade Klubnik, 37 total touchdowns a year ago, and what happened? He brought down the turnover numbers. That was a big thing on him 2 years ago as his starting quarterback, not unlike what Garrett Nussmeier did last year. People said, hey, we love your aggressiveness. We love what we've seen from you. We know the talent's there. Can you limit the turnovers? He had single-digit turnovers last season. And they played in extra games because they got into the college football playoff. Also, I just mentioned it. It might actually be, as much as you've struggled these last 5 years, this might actually be the best team you've played in the season opener, at least on paper going into the matchup. Florida State wound up being really good. The second go-round in Florida State, 2023 version. But going into it, you were like, hey, I like this matchup. There's a lot of things you can find positive for LSU. And then last year, you lose to USC, who went 6-6. They were nothing to write home about. Florida State, the first time, they were okay. Mississippi State collapsed after KJ Costello set the SEC passing record on you. He was benched 2 weeks later. And then UCLA, they were a middle-of-the-road team. So it's one thing to struggle in season openers. You're also struggling against, outside of 1 year against Florida State, pretty average teams. Clemson is a preseason top 10 team no matter where you look. So for those reasons, this is a game that worries me. I could see this being a season-defining game. There are some reasons for optimism, though. For one, this might be LSU's best team under Brian Kelly. And since the 2019 team where you started this skit, you have a returning quarterback who finished the season as hot as anybody in college football, who is squarely in the Heisman conversation heading into next season. You return both your offensive and defensive coordinators. That's huge. You can't say that for a lot of teams. Clemson themselves breaking in a new defensive coordinator. He was excellent where he was a year ago, but he still was not in that building. Joe Sloan's only going to get more and more familiar as the play caller here at LSU. Him and Garrett Nussmeier's relationship is only going to get stronger. With Blake Baker, you already saw the jump he made from year 1 to year 2 at Missouri. They were an awful defense. They were ranked like 120th in the country. Blake Baker gets there. They're in the 50s. The next season, they're a top 25 defense. I don't see why you can't make the same jump here at LSU. LSU's defense was horrendous the last year under Matt House. They hovered around, about the 50 mark, about where they were his first year at Missouri. Why can't he make that big jump this year? You should also be much improved in the secondary. That's important in the matchup against Clemson because they were 18th in total offense last year. I talked about the 37 touchdowns for Cade Klubnik. You return your 3 leading receivers. They really couldn't run the ball last year. They weren't very good at it, and their lead running back from a year ago, Phil Maffa, he's also not on the team anymore. So you're breaking in a new running back on a team that wasn't able to run the football. So LSU matches up well with them, but again, the struggles that we have seen from LSU in the opening games, playing, in my opinion, the best team on paper you have played since this 5-year skid, it is a coin flip game. It is the definition of a coin flip game. And I think Chris Lowe nailed it. I think he was absolutely right to include this the season-defining game. Because think about it last year. There was so much hype coming into last season. Sure, you replaced Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels. Everyone was so excited to see Garrett Nussmeier. You hired Blake Baker. You knew your defense was going to be improved. So much build-up to the first game of the year, only for everything to kind of collapse after game 1. And everyone's kind of looking around, fans, players, coaches saying, okay, where do we go from here? When you lose the first game of the season, because Clemson is not a conference game, obviously. LSU could lose to Clemson week 1. They could go run the table in the SEC, win the SEC championship. They're going to be a top 4 seed in the college football playoff, no question about it. But losing the first game of the season allows you such a little margin of error that it almost is a must-win game. And it's going to set the tone for you for the rest of the season. If you can get that big win week 1, you get the monkey off your back, you finally perform well in the opener, you're in that win column, you have a top 10 win early in the season, that's really going to kickstart everything for you down the road. You don't have to play from behind. You're behind the 8 ball every year these last 4 or 5 years because you start the season 0-1. If you can get that win in week 1 in that opener, it's huge. I agree. I think that is the season-defining game. For what it's worth, ESPN did not put Clemson's season-defining game as the LSU Tigers. They did at Louisville on November 14th, and they said, look, it's tempting to suggest the opener against LSU will tell the story of the 2025 season for Clemson, but look no further than last season. Because remember, that was the game in Ireland. It was 6-0 at halftime. Clemson looked like they were right in it. Georgia came out in the second half and blew the doors off the Clemson Tigers. It was 34-3. People were calling for Dabo's job, saying, hey, the game's passed him by. He won't adapt. He doesn't like the transfer portal. It's time to wrap this up. Yeah, they made the college football playoff last season. It's going to be Louisville because that was the game that almost derailed their season a year ago. I mentioned Dabo Swinney 70-5 at home since 2014. Louisville got him at Memorial Stadium last year. And so did South Carolina at the end of the year. That's why Clemson was able to scoot in without winning the ACC championship. So while it might be the season-defining game for LSU, they don't believe it is for Clemson. I actually agree, though. I know you have tough games. I know you have to go on the road to Ole Miss. I know you have to go to Alabama. I know there are tough games on this schedule. You got to win the opener. We say it every single year, and we're going to keep repeating it. Me, everybody else on this station, until you get it done. I agree. I think the season-defining game is that opener for the LSU Tigers against Clemson on the road.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.